An incredibly tragic story here. We have learned new information that the 33-year-old social media model was strangled to death. That's according to the Fort Bend County Medical Examiner's Office. And police are also now trying to figure out a timeline of when this all may have happened, and also shared with us that they have not seen any signs of forced entry to the apartment. The details still murky as to what led up to the horrific murder of 33-year-old Janae Gagnier, known as Miss Mercedes Morr on social media, with a following of 2.6 million.
We want to find out why her, why him.
The body of the woman was discovered Sunday afternoon inside her apartment at the Cortland Sugarland complex. According to the medical examiner, she died of strangulation and traumatic concussion in what police are investigating as a murder-suicide. A second body also found. Richmond police say it belongs to this man, 34-year-old Kevin Accordo, who died by suicide caused by multiple sharp force trauma.
Before the headlines, before the police tape, before her name trended across every social media feed, Mercedes Morr lived in a world that seemed untouchable. Her Instagram, followed by more than 2.6 million people, was a constant stream of luxury and allure, designer clothes, polished selfies, and celebrity snapshots alongside the likes of Drake, Offset, and Cardi B. She had a face the camera adored, a figure sculpted for attention, and a brand that promised endless glamour. But beyond the filters and curated captions was a young woman named Janae Gagnier, a daughter, a sister, and a determined hustler who had built her name from nothing. She was bold, business-minded, and in control of her image. Yet, somewhere in the quiet corners of the internet, a man she had never met was piecing together her life in obsessive detail, plotting a journey that would end in tragedy. He would travel close to 1,000 miles from Florida to Texas, carrying a motive only he understood, and walk into the one place Mercedes thought she was safe, her own home. But was it a twisted idea of love? Jealousy? Or something darker, rooted in obsession so deep it blurred the line between fantasy and reality? Long before she was Mercedes Morr, Janae grew up in Houston, Texas, in a military household that valued discipline, hard work, and ambition. Her father, Mark, quiet but fiercely protective, balanced her mother, Janetta, whose energy and drive pushed the family forward. Together they ran a small restaurant, teaching their children early that nothing came without effort. Janae absorbed those lessons quickly. By the age of 12, she was braiding hair for cash in the garage, her first taste of financial independence. But life wasn't without complications. When her parents divorced, she found herself moving back and forth between Texas and California, adjusting to two different homes, navigating new schools, and wrestling with identity and belonging. She was expressive and strong-willed, traits that sometimes led to clashes with her parents and entanglements in unhealthy friendships. After graduating high school, she enrolled in a dental assistant program, but the career path didn't stick. A move to Las Vegas with her then-boyfriend opened new doors, and it was there she reinvented herself, first as a dancer, then as a model, and eventually as the persona the world would come to know, Mercedes Morr. Her feed became a gallery of high-fashion, beauty campaigns, and the kind of nightlife imagery that dripped with opulence. But away from the spotlight, Mercedes stayed grounded, calling her mother her best friend and clinging to her identity as Daddy's girl. She sent money home, planned to launch a clothing line and hair extension business, and envisioned building an empire that stretched beyond the confines of Instagram. Success brought attention, and not all of it welcome. Mercedes had her share of admirers, but some took their fascination too far. Over the years, she had been doxxed, her personal details leaked online. Unsolicited gifts would arrive, sometimes to her post office box, other times uncomfortably close to home. She adapted, becoming cautious about the details she shared, cropping out recognizable locations, avoiding showing her front door, and moving into a gated community in Richmond, Texas, where she believed extra security might keep danger at bay. Yet the unease lingered. She checked her locks twice, kept her guard up, and confided in her father that she didn't like being home alone, especially when her boyfriend, a man she spoke about seriously for the first time in years, was away. That relationship, according to close friends, felt different. She'd had romances before, but many couldn't accept her public persona, her independence, or her decision to monetize platforms like OnlyFans. They asked her to choose between them and her career, a choice she was unwilling to make. This new partner seemed to embrace her as she was, and when she spoke about him, her tone softened. There were mentions of marriage, children, a future. Still, she kept his identity private, never naming him publicly. Late August of 2021 brought an unbearable heat to Texas. On the 29th, a Sunday, her absence from social media stretched into its third day. Highly unusual for someone who posted almost daily, whether it was a casual selfie, a promotional plug, or a personal thought. The silence wasn't just out of character, it was a red flag. Her sister, London, noticed first. Janae wasn't answering texts, her phone was going straight to voicemail, and she hadn't mentioned taking any time off. London called their father, her voice tense. Mark had just returned from a fishing trip when he got the news, and he didn't hesitate. He knew his daughter, this wasn't how she operated. Driving to her apartment at the Cortland complex, a gated development she had chosen for safety, he spotted her BMW parked outside. The building was quiet, the late summer air heavy and still. He knocked on her door. No answer. He called again. Nothing. An unease he couldn't shake tightened in his chest. Acting on instinct, Mark kicked in the door. Inside, the stillness was suffocating. No music played, no television murmured in the background, just an unnatural silence. As his eyes adjusted, they landed on the staircase. At the bottom lay his daughter, motionless, her clothing torn. At first, he thought she might have fallen, but as he stepped further in, the scene revealed itself as something far more horrific. The apartment bore signs of chaos, blood smeared across walls, furniture disturbed. And then there were the messages. In bright lipstick, scrawled across multiple walls, were words that read like fragments of a disturbed confession. I should have stayed in Florida. I was used. I wish I never loved her. Above a mirror, the final chilling phrase, I'm sorry. The handwriting was frantic, uneven, almost desperate. Mark's attention shifted upstairs, where he found a man sprawled on the floor, still alive but slipping away. His throat bore a deep self-inflicted wound, and each labored breath was a wet, gurgling sound. It was too late. Within minutes, he was gone. Authorities would later identify him as 34-year-old Kevin Alexander Accordo from Tallahassee, Florida. He was a stranger to Mercedes, not an ex-boyfriend, not a casual acquaintance, someone who existed entirely outside her circle. Investigators believe he had followed her online for months, if not longer, studying her life and constructing an imagined connection between them. Evidence suggests Accordo drove the nearly 1,000 miles from Florida to Texas with the intent to confront her. Somehow, he gained entry to her apartment, where he may have remained for up to 2 days. The writing on the walls, the disarray in the home, and the absence of forced entry pointed to a calculated intrusion rather than a chaotic break-in. Whether he waited for her to return or confronted her shortly after arriving remains unclear, but what is certain is that the encounter ended in violence and 2 lives lost, the woman whose life was on display for millions, and the man whose obsession consumed him entirely.
What I saw, I wouldn't want any parent to go through. I could look in the room, there's writing all over the wall. I kind of just was in shock for the whole day. I knew something was wrong. That's not my daughter. She would call me all the time, talk about, Daddy, I'm checking on you. And I'd be like, no, I'm checking on you. You know, that was our little joke. And I knew something was wrong as soon as I got there.
Yeah, that was our baby. And as many people in Houston knew her and loved her, she was as sweet with them as she is with us. She took care of people. She's just a sweetheart. And my baby's gone from a tragic event that didn't have to happen. Being strangled to death is a horrible way to die. And my baby's gone. And it was horrible. Didn't even think about it.
Even as police pieced together timelines and motives, questions multiplied. What had pushed him to act? Did he believe they shared a relationship? Was he driven by rejection, or by the realization that the fantasy he'd constructed was nothing more than that, a fantasy? And, perhaps most hauntingly, had Mercedes sensed, in those final days, That the shadow following her had finally caught up? How he gained entry remains unclear. There were no signs of forced entry, and her apartment was on the second floor, accessible only via a single staircase. It's possible he tailgated behind another resident into the gated community or followed her home and waited for the perfect moment. Either way, he got inside, and he didn't leave. The medical examiner later confirmed that Mercedes had died from strangulation and blunt force trauma to the head. She had fought back but was ultimately overpowered. Her final moments were violent, terrifying, and tragic. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. News of her death swept across the internet, sparking grief, confusion, and anger. Fans posted tributes, and hashtags like #RIP Mercedes Morr trended for days. But in the midst of mourning, misinformation spread like wildfire. Rumors falsely claimed she had died from COVID-19, others suggested a sugar daddy was involved, and some even blamed her career or lifestyle, accusing her of inviting danger because of the way she lived online. Her family was devastated, not just by the loss but by the lies. Mark Geer, the man who found his daughter's body, gave interviews through tears. He described her not as an internet star but as his baby girl. She was kind. She took care of people. She was love, he said. But that love was not enough to shield her from a predator with internet access, a car, and a fantasy. Behind the filters, behind the glamour, behind the fame, Mercedes was just a daughter who wanted to feel safe in her own home. Instead, she was murdered in it. The scene inside Mercedes Morr's apartment was so disturbing that even veteran investigators were shaken, blood on the walls, messages written in lipstick, 2 bodies, one dead, one dying. It looked like something out of a psychological thriller, but it was all too real. The question now was, how did this happen? The Richmond Police Department and Fort Bend County Sheriff's Office launched a joint investigation immediately. Forensics began combing through the apartment for DNA, fingerprints, and signs of forced entry, but curiously, there were none. No shattered glass, no broken locks, no surveillance footage of a break-in. This wasn't a random attack or a burglary gone wrong. It was premeditated. Before her name became a headline and her story echoed through every corner of social media, before yellow police tape cordoned off her home and strangers debated her fate online, Mercedes Morr existed in a realm that felt untouchable. To her 2.6 million Instagram followers, she was the embodiment of high-gloss glamour, tailored designer outfits, flawless makeup, and snapshots alongside rap royalty like Drake, Offset, and Cardi B. She had a face the lens adored, curves that drew stares, and a digital brand that pulsed with an aura of unending luxury. But behind the filtered images and carefully chosen captions stood a woman named Janae Gagnier, a daughter, a sister, and an unrelenting self-starter who had built her image and business brick by brick. She was confident, fiercely independent, and meticulous in her presentation. Yet far away from her curated feed, in the shadowy corners of the internet, an unseen figure was obsessively assembling her life into a blueprint, an obsession so consuming it would propel him nearly 1,000 miles toward a tragic collision. His reasons remain locked away forever, whether warped love, festering jealousy, or a fixation that had drifted far beyond the border of reality. Years before she became Mercedes, Janae's life began in Houston, Texas, in a disciplined military household. Her father, Mark, was the quieter presence, steady, observant, deeply protective, while her mother, Janetta, radiated energy and drive. Together they managed a small family restaurant, instilling in their children the belief that nothing worth having came without grit and persistence. Janae absorbed those lessons early. By the age of 12, she was braiding hair for neighborhood kids in the family garage, collecting her own money, and tasting independence for the first time. But her upbringing wasn't without turbulence. When her parents divorced, she was shuffled between Texas and California, toggling between 2 households, adapting to new schools, and working out who she was in environments that sometimes felt worlds apart. Her strong will and expressive personality, traits that later helped her build a career, occasionally sparked conflict at home and pulled her into friendships that didn't always serve her best interests. After high school, she tried the path of dental assisting, enrolling in a program that seemed stable but ultimately left her restless. A move to Las Vegas with a boyfriend opened an entirely different chapter. In the glittering, chaotic nightlife of the city, she reinvented herself, first as a dancer, then a model, and eventually as the digital persona that would make her famous, Mercedes Morr. Her Instagram became a carefully curated portfolio of high fashion, brand endorsements, and a nightlife dripping with exclusivity. She cultivated not just an audience, but a marketable image that brought in real income. And while she played the role of the high-profile influencer to perfection, those close to her knew she remained grounded. She called her mother almost daily, leaned on her father for advice, and spoke often about business ventures she hoped to launch: a clothing line, a luxury hair extension brand, perhaps even a beauty spa. But fame brought an unwelcome shadow. The same visibility that fueled her career attracted obsessive attention. By late August 2021, the Texas heat was unrelenting. On Sunday, August 29th, the silence from her Instagram reached its third day. For someone who posted daily, be it a casual selfie, a brand plug, or a cryptic thought, this absence was glaring. Her sister, London, noticed first. Texts went unanswered. Calls went to voicemail. No mention of a break from social media had been made. The unease in London's voice was immediate when she phoned their father. Mark had just returned from a fishing trip, still carrying the quiet satisfaction of the water, but the moment he heard the worry in his daughter's tone, his instincts sharpened. He drove straight to her apartment at the Cortland complex, a secure, gated development she had chosen precisely because it felt safer. Her BMW sat parked outside. The late summer air was heavy, the quiet almost unnatural. He knocked. Waited. Knocked again. No sound. He called her name through the door. Nothing. The dread settled in deep, and Mark did what any father who knew his daughter's patterns would do. He forced his way in. The stillness inside was suffocating. No hum of music, no flicker of a television. Just silence, pressing in from all directions. His eyes swept the space until they landed on the base of the staircase. Janae lay there, still, her clothing torn. For a split second he thought maybe she had fallen, but as he stepped closer, reality sharpened its edges. The apartment bore the signs of a struggle, blood smeared along the walls, furniture disturbed. And then he saw the words. In smeared lipstick, scrawled across multiple walls, were sentences that read like the fragments of a collapsing mind. I should have stayed in Florida. I was used. I wish I had never loved her. Above a mirror, in jagged letters, the final line, I'm sorry. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, almost frantic, as if scratched into the walls during some fevered breakdown. Mark's gaze was pulled upstairs, where he found a man sprawled on the floor, still clinging to life but fading fast. A deep wound cut across his throat, the gurgle of each labored breath filling the room. There was nothing to be done. Within minutes, he was gone. The man was later identified as Kevin Alexander Accordo, 34, of Tallahassee, Florida. He wasn't an ex-boyfriend. He wasn't a casual acquaintance. He wasn't anyone Mercedes had ever spoken to. Investigators would later piece together that he had been watching her from a distance for months, maybe longer, studying her life online, constructing an imagined intimacy she had no part in. The journey he took was staggering, nearly 1,000 miles from Florida to Texas. Authorities believe he entered her home without force, suggesting he may have found a way in quietly, possibly waiting for her inside. How long he remained there is uncertain, though some evidence points to as much as 2 days. The messages on the wall, the lack of forced entry, the general disarray, it all suggested a planned intrusion, not a sudden, chaotic break-in. Whether he ambushed her upon her arrival or confronted her shortly after she walked through her own front door remains unknown. What is certain is that the encounter spiraled into fatal violence, claiming both her life and his. Even with a clear sequence of events, the motive sits in a murky fog. Did he truly believe there was a relationship between them? Had he convinced himself she had betrayed him in some way? Or was this simply the moment when years of silent fixation erupted into irreversible action? Those questions remain unanswered, their weight carried by the family who must live with the loss. In the days that followed, the headlines moved quickly. Celebrity friends posting tributes, fans expressing grief in the comments section of her last posts, news outlets piecing together fragments of her life into neat but incomplete summaries. But for those who knew Janae, the tragedy wasn't just the loss of a public figure, it was the sudden, brutal erasure of a daughter, a sister, a woman who had been building a future on her own terms. The story of Mercedes Morr is a collision between two modern realities, the power and opportunity of online visibility, and the unpredictable danger it can draw. For Janae, the digital stage offered independence, financial stability, and a platform for her ambitions. For her killer, it became a portal into her life, one that fed a dangerous illusion until the boundary between screen and reality shattered completely. And in that shattering, two lives ended, one by violence, the other by the weight of his own hand, leaving behind a family, a fan base, and a chilling reminder that the world behind a screen can sometimes be far too close for comfort.
She just was so happy and so funny and just so loving, and she just loved to joke
It would be all
around.
about her.
Yeah, as it is.
We wouldn't be up here. It would be all about you.
As it should be. As about her. And again, we're going to remember that amazing spirit, that funny laugh, that 4'11" body, but that 8 tall, experience that we all got. So I appreciate her and love her, and we'll miss her forever and ever. Ever and ever.
If this case gripped you, share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to True Crime's Venue for more stories that remind us of the hidden dangers we often overlook. Tap the notification bell so you won't miss our next story. You can also check our curated playlist linked in the description. See you in our next video.